I'm McKenna. I'm one of the VAP coordinators. I have Jean Sbarra here, and I just want to introduce her really quick, and then she's going to start her talk.
Jean Sbarra Jones.
Jean Sbarra Jones.
So
Sorry. Oh, I missed it. Sorry. Jean Sbarra Jones received her MFA from Boston University and her BFA from the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. She has exhibited widely since 1993 and has received many honors and awards, including multiple residencies at the Vermont Studio School and the Nan Award, Boston University. Jean's paintings have always been included in shows juried by well-known artists such as William Bailey, Judy Chicago, Faith Ringgold, and Donald Sultan. Her work is included in many private collections, including the estate of the late Kenneth Nolan, a well-known 1960s color field painter. Her work is represented by Alpha Gallery in Boston, Massachusetts. Since 2009, Jones has taught at the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. Prior to that, she has taught at the Artists Institute of Boston, now part of Lesley University, and the New England School of Art and Design, among others. Amid her recent works is a series of dresses floating in water. When asked about meaning, Jean said, quote, "The dress revealed itself as a metaphor. The worn and the well-traveled dress represents renewal by light and water." End quote. Many have made observations about this body of work. A notable comment, quote, "Your dresses provoke so many ideas. Freedom, resistance, the passage of time and loss. They look so organic in their settings. There is an element of surprise, but it is also like water welcomes them in." End quote. All right, and if everybody can please, round of applause.
Good morning, everyone, or almost good afternoon. Let me take this out here. My name is Jean Sbarra Jones. Thank you so much for inviting me to speak today. It's an honor and a privilege to be here. I've never been here before. Your school is beautiful. The museum, unfortunately, isn't open today, but I hope to make it tomorrow to be able to see what's going on. But even that first exhibit walking in was just really inspiring and impressive. So I'm starting with this painting here that you saw on whatever advertisements there were for the Visiting Artist Series. One of the reasons why I show it is because it was a pivotal piece in the story of the evolution of my work and kind of my life. My husband, who I'll reference quite a bit probably during this presentation, his name is Norm, and he's a theater artist. He's a director and an actor, and and what else does he do? I guess that's it. But he always emphasizes the importance of storytelling. For instance, when he directs a play by Shakespeare, he tries to make it really clear what's going on in the story, regardless of how pretty obscure the language can be. So the audience knows what's happening, not just by what the actors are saying, but how they're saying it, where he emphasizes words, what are the sounds, what's he doing with lighting and props and all that kind of stuff. So pardon me if I'm a little clumsy with all this stuff in my hand. So this kind of begins what I'm going to be telling you about how my work started and where I came from. I'm going to start in graduate school. I went to school at Boston University. I got my MFA there. That's where I'm going to start in graduate school. I studied with John Moore and John Walker. I don't know if you know either of those artists. John Walker, his work is on the right, on my left. And he is an American hyperrealist painter, and he was really, really concerned with making sure that every line was straight, that every detail was perfectly rendered. Also interested in kind of a geometric abstraction, but super real artist, and would freak out if there was like a little hair on his canvas or anything like that. The other artist is John Walker. I don't know if you've heard of him before. He's an abstract modernist painter who was kind of the antithesis of what John Moore was. They're both still alive. So he is a British modernist painter who worked with gobs of paint. He used to talk about painting being like playing in the mud. So it was a very different experience for him in the way he went about and thought about painting. So these pieces were done at the very beginning of graduate school for me. Just so that you know, I was really interested in theater before I became a visual artist. I particularly loved acting, but also even as a very young kid, I was in children's theater, and I used to love the costumes and the lighting. And I remember I played like the person that comes out and introduces everyone at the beginning of the play, and I remember my costume was lavender and turquoise velvet, and I just went nuts because I just was so in love with those two combinations. That's kind of a backstory to how I sort of put these things together. I was working from direct observation. I was really interested in theater, costume, texture, lighting, both artificial and natural. And what I would do before I started painting was I would kind of build a set. So for instance, the painting on the left, that is the left, yes. No, that's your right. So it's my left, so I have to keep remembering, right? So the painting on the right is, I actually built that set. So what I did was I got panels and I painted them the colors that I wanted to be in the set. Instead of like finding a wall and just putting a still life in front of the wall, I was not interested in that at all. I was more interested in creating some kind of a story. There was also sort of a feeling of darkness and light happening in these. I wanted there to be this light room, and then if you turn around the corner, you might see something happening in the dark. At the time, I was also working with models. And what I would do is I would just hang around undergrad classes and look for women that I thought looked kind of brooding, mysterious, possibly a little bit depressed. But there was something that I wanted in the way they presented themselves, that I wanted to paint. So they would sit in my studio. These paintings would take me about 6 hours. This is the same model. I had like huge amounts of vintage clothing that I collected. There was a thrift store down the street from BU that we all used to go to all the time, and I'd just always be picking up costumes and textures and gloves and jewelry and anything I could find to create characters. Again, we're still kind of in the theater. So I was creating a character. I was not particularly interested in an exact likeness, obviously. I was actually talking and painting at the same time. I was, as I said, I was talking to the models and asking them about who they were, what they liked, what was going on in their lives, and the stories were really pretty involved. I got pretty personal. So what I was interested in is trying to find out who they were as people. And as I said, here I was also taking lots of liberties with color. Clearly, the model on the right didn't have a green face, but I was leaning towards more of an expressionist style in my work. At the time, I was looking at a couple different artists. Here are two that I was looking at. We have Max Beckmann, a German artist who you're probably familiar with from he was working in the 30s and 40s. Also Chaim Soutine, a Russian-French artist who is on the left. So those were some of the artists that I was looking at that time. I'll go back to doing it this way. I've got like 5 different ways I can move a slide. I'm like, okay. All right, so this was this came about one night. I was hanging around my studio and I was talking with some friends and drinking wine. You probably can relate to sitting in your studio late at night and just talking with people, drinking wine. And I had these props around. I had wine glasses. I had this mirror. There was a couple of mirrors in my earlier still lifes. And so I asked my friend to pose for me. And I sort of like created somewhat of a film still. I said, will you just pose for me and I'm going to take a snapshot. So I took a snapshot and I did this painting the next day from the snapshot. And it really only took about a half an hour. It was one of these quick little gestural paintings that I kind of mushed paint together and just blobbed on. And I put it to the side, and I remember John Moore, remember the super realist, came into my studio and he said, Jean, that's the best thing you've done all semester. And I was kind of horrified. I'm like, really? And I was also really scared because a long time ago at Boston University, and probably still in some ateliers around the country, painting from any kind of photo reference was a sin, and I mean a sin. You just didn't do it. And so I was hiding that I was doing this. But what happened was that I knew that I couldn't really get what I wanted to paint just from my imagination or from setting up another still life or from painting from the model. I wanted them all to be kind of connected. So as horrified as I also was really freed up. And what I did was I decided that I was going to continue working like this in and out of graduate school. So the next series of drawings and paintings happened because I was working in a trendy restaurant in Boston after I got out of graduate school. That happens to a lot of graduate students. Restaurant work is your friend. So I was waitressing, and I had lots of other friends that were waitressing that were wannabe actors, models, and were totally thrilled to be involved in this project. I rented a hotel room in downtown Boston. I had a series of different models come up and into the hotel room, and I would stage these scenes. So I was kind of acting like a director, staging scenes in this hotel room. We were doing like the morning after with the coffee. We ordered room service. We stayed the whole night. And you can probably see this kind of a relationship from the women that I was looking to paint and the women that I was setting up to stage. So there was another thing. So obviously the work is not super realistic, nor is it completely abstract. So there was kind of a combination thing going on. I was interested in gobs of paint also. I was also interested in expressionism. And at times I wanted things to look like something. I wanted to tell an actual story. So I was looking at two photographers at the time, Cindy Sherman and Nan Golden. This was a long time ago. Cindy Sherman, late 70s, early 80s, did a series of black and white photographs that were called film stills. And this is one of hers on the left. What she was doing was she was creating self-portraits that she put herself in stereotypical scenes of the 50s housewife. So her photograph on the right, obviously my painting on the left from one of the hotel things. And here's just a couple more of her film stills. So then I decided that I wanted to move to a different location, staying with the motel theme. Now we definitely downgrade. We go to a place off of Route 1 in Saugus, if anyone knows Massachusetts. Seedy hotel. So these were some of the paintings that I did from that location. The decor was really pretty atrocious, but kind of atrocious in a good way. It had this great sort of mod feeling. There was this kind of yellowy ochre color, and I was working from Polaroids. I don't know how many of you remember Polaroid cameras, but I was working from Polaroid cameras so that the images themselves were really tiny little squares. So I had to take a lot of liberties and sort of invent from these and create color and absolutely expression. I couldn't really even see the faces in the images, but what I would do is I would scrape the face out, paint it again, scrape it out, paint it again. Much like an actor does, I felt very much like I was acting in my own paintings because I needed to have an expression that felt true to whatever character I was portraying. And I actually go to England every year. I haven't gone for the past 3 years because of the pandemic, but my husband teaches a theater trip, and I always take the role of the art person. So we go to like the National Theater, and we talk about acting in portraits. And we walk around and we look at Caravaggio, who used really natural, he used real life models and what makes an image or an expression feel real and what feels artificial, and is there such a thing as good and bad acting in painting, or is it meant to be mannered, or I don't know. But anyway, that's going off on a little bit of a tangent, but that's something to tell you about how theater is kind of always actively working in my mind. This is Nan Goldin, the other artist that I was telling you, and this almost seems really derivative from my influence of Nan Goldin's work. And she was known for her documentation. Can everyone hear me through this microphone? Yes? Okay, great. She was known for her documentation, and this is a quote, of love, sexuality, glamour, beauty, death, intoxication, and pain. Very cheery stuff. Her photos feature intimate details of her life and those in it. So now you're gonna see a big change. So I had just finished having a solo exhibition of all the women in the hotel room at a gallery, and I was scheduled to have another show within a year, which is actually kind of a short time. I was kind of panicked. I ran out of models. I left that restaurant. I didn't have what I thought was enough time, and honestly, I was getting kind of sick of still painting the same women in hotel rooms. That was kind of moving out of my consciousness. I wasn't as interested or intrigued in doing that anymore. So what I did have was clothing left over from all the things that I had staged. So these are directly from life. These were done I was living in the top floor of Victorian House, and the living room was my studio, so I would once again paint the wall if I wanted it a certain color. The painting on the right, the reason why I chose this arrangement was I was very interested in the formal relationship of the kind of cooler pink against the warmer red, and then that sort of neutral gray in the back. And the one on the right, I wanted to see what I could do with a really condensed value scale, kind of. That was sort of what I was thinking of. And then I started to just paint the dress on its own. And here's where it gets a little bit personal, in that you can probably surmise that all those women that I was painting and all that stuff that I was searching for had something to do with what was going on in my own life, which it did. And I was kind of lost, but hopeful in a way, going through a healing kind of spiritual quest. That sounds really corny. I'm not going to say journey, but it was a way of moving away from that world and trying to move into something that was more uplifting. I don't even know if uplifting is the word, because these are kind of sad too. So anyway, I did this. I stripped out all the color, and I also stripped out the furniture and everything else. And I did a whole series of these single dresses. I'm not showing you all of them, but there was a whole series of them. And then, unfortunately, I made this triptych, which I think is really terrible. But I wanted to show it to you, to show you like why and how I landed there. I was feeling the pressure of making something that was connected to how I felt, like this tortured soul. So I wanted more angst in my work. So I took this like really cliche Barbie doll image and wrapped it in fabric and pearls. And I have no idea what I was trying to say here, but I do know that I don't think these worked at all. I think that what I was trying to do was force content without it actually coming from within. And that created images that really looked to me kind of superficial. Staged not a good way, staged in a kind of, I don't know the word. I guess superficial is the only one I can come up with right now. So I was pretty discouraged. Oh, what happened too was that I had an interview with a pretty nice gallery in Boston that I had wanted to be in for a long time. And they had reached out to me because they were really interested in the single white dresses that I had sent, like a whole slew of them, and they thought they were really interesting and said, oh, come in. I showed them and they said, we love these. Let's just, keep in touch and come in again in a couple months or 6 months and show us what you're up to. And I went in with these and they were like, oh, sorry, we're not interested at all anymore. And I was really pretty discouraged. And but I think I learned a lot. But I also learned that I would have had to paint those white dresses for a long time if when they say we want to see what you're doing, and sometimes it means we want to see that you're staying on what we like so that we can find a clientele for you. So I was probably too young to have gallery representation anyway at that point because I was all over the place in terms of what I wanted to paint. So I went and saw an undergrad professor and sort of was talking to them about what was going on in my work. And they said, Jean, why don't you just go home and paint? Just paint whatever. So I said, okay. So I went home and I didn't let go of the dress or the costumes, but I just started painting what was in front of me. And I started focusing in these two paintings on form, light, color, all that kind of thing. What I want to point out is this blue dress. These look really, do they look blurry to you, these images? Not really? Okay. They look great here, but they look kind of blurred out there. But anyway, the blue dress in the middle was this dress that I still have and I still use in teaching because it's this great light blue satin that no matter what you do with it, it keeps its form. So the crispness of the satin stays in place. And I've had it forever, I've used it forever, and that's one of the reasons, because a lot of fabric just kind of blobs, and this one has a lot of structure to it. So you'll see it again, it will come up again. This happened in a weird way. I was shooting film, I don't know how many of you remember film, but this is a photograph. This is a photograph that I took on a vacation in Monhegan Island off the coast of Maine. I was shooting sunsets, and double exposure. There was a roll underneath of white dresses. What came out was this image of the white dress in the landscape, and I said, aha, that sounds like a sign. Maybe I'm supposed to take the dress out into the landscape. So I did. And I took shoes out into the landscape meaning out into the woods and snow, and I looked at these afterwards and I said, oh, come on, Jean, you're going to leave in the hanger? It was like, well, what? That looks really dumb. Like, why would you leave that? There's no mystery there. It's just you took a dress and you hung it on a tree, big deal. So there was something about it that I still really liked. So I did it again, and this time I think that I was able to sort of integrate the dress and the landscape more. It was more plastic, it felt more like the light was shining through. The images had more of an abstract integrity, and it just was more of what I was looking for. So there was a connection between the dress and the landscape that I hadn't gotten before, but the hanger had to go. And also the way I was painting had to go. I had to have paint that moved from one thing to another instead of stopping, mixing, picking up, stopping, mixing, picking up. I've learned that in a lot of the way that I paint. There's a couple of different ways to get what you want, and it's not always the same thing that you do all the time. So we're going to move on in my story to getting married. So I got married to the husband, Norm, that I told you about before. The theater guy is also a fishing guy. So we were living in Gloucester, Mass. I don't know, any of you know Gloucester? Beautiful, beautiful old fishing village almost, North Shore of Massachusetts. And we took a lot of walks along the docks that were really kind of grungy, old, beat up, but gorgeous. In terms of their possibility with composition, the lines, the angles, the light, the texture, everything was really, really exciting to me to paint. So it was one of those times in between, like, thinking about content and just painting. So I was painting these, and I purposely decided to paint monochromatically, but I didn't want to paint completely monochromatically. So what I did was I pre-mixed gradated warm and cool grays, very slightly warm, very slightly cool, so that what I could do was I could not have to pick up my brush and just kind of paint fluidly throughout. So that's what I was doing with this series. So you can kind of see there's a lot of complexity in the image itself, but there was a lot of fluidity in the way that I was painting the complexity, if that makes sense. Really interested in that kind of thing happening. But I kind of, after I finished this series, I thought, you know, where am I in this? Where am I? And where am I? I'm usually back to the dress. So what I did was I brought the dress out onto the dock and said, okay, there's a way of connecting the two. If I can connect it into the landscape, I can connect it into the dock. And so I did a series of paintings of this diaphanous dress in and among the docks. One of the things that really intrigued me with this work was the juxtaposition of fragility and things that were sharp and very dirty. You know, there was this white dress and then there was all this other stuff. I had a show of this work at the college that I was teaching at, and some of the, what happened was the theater students did monologues that were written by some of the creative writing students who went around and wrote stories or poems about each one of these dresses and where they'd been and who they were. And it was actually really interesting. You could go up and you could pick up a phone and listen to the monologue while you were looking at the paintings. So that was an interesting way, I think, of bringing a kind of surprising narrative to these. And then I decided that I wanted to work in color again. One of the reasons why I wanted to work in color again was because the blue boats were just absolutely stunning, especially when they were next to the rust. So there was the blue and there was the rust, and I loved that, the connection of those. And so I brought this kind of ugly pink dress, but I really liked the way it looked on the boat. And so my husband and I, we actually went out on his boat and started flinging the dresses onto the boats in order to get images. Weren't supposed to do that. Would probably have gotten in a lot of trouble had anyone seen us, but nobody saw us, so it was okay. But what happened, unfortunately, was one of the dresses fell off and into the water and was never to be seen again. It drowned. We lost that dress. But while it was going, I managed to shoot a couple of pictures of it, and that is the origin of my Dress in Water series. It took a while to get there, but that's how it happened. And so then I just started doing this purposefully. And I think that what intrigued me so much was not at all what it meant, like what I thought it meant about the dress being in the water, but much more about the formal qualities of the wet dress and what color it made when the light was shining on it. And I just was really fascinated by all that stuff. I'm gonna, as I go through some of these dresses in waters, they're dresses in water. There's quite a few of them. So I'm gonna talk to you a little bit about the process of how I staged these and got the images. There's that blue dress again, the one that I told you about before. Phenomenal the way it holds its own. It floats, but it doesn't disappear. So what I did was Norm would come out with me. He always loved to get involved in these things because he's a theater guy, so for him it was fun. And he would take the dress and attach it to what other than a fishing line, and take the dress and fling it out into whatever body of water we were at. So we wouldn't lose the dress because we learned our lesson. We didn't really want to lose any of these dresses. And he would fling the dress around until it made the shape of something that resembled a dress. I didn't want it to be a blob of fabric floating in the water. That wasn't interesting to me. Even though formally it might have been interesting to me if I wanted to push it to more abstraction, which I could have. And probably would have loved doing, but there was something in my psyche that wanted there to be somewhat of a narrative. So here we go again with that reliable blue dress. Here it is again. And it takes on so many forms, and it's amazing how much it does. This one is not the blue dress. It does kind of look like a little bit of a blob. But one of the things I like about this one is I really like the, can I go up here? Is this, no, I can't do that, forget it. Did I just move? I didn't mean to. Okay, I really like the little piece of red kind of in the upper part of the dress, right above the middle, that kind of light that shines through. That's my favorite part of that painting, just to let you know. And so I was doing these dresses pretty much solitary. I got rid of like any kind of background or anything that you could see, and the ones before you could see the reflections of the boat, but here you couldn't. And then what I did was I started adding the landscape to the dress a little bit more. I started including it more. I became intrigued again by painting landscape elements, rocks. Again, we have that same difference between sharp edges and soft fabric. Here's another one this one kind of looks like a pancake or something. It's so flat and thin on the top. It's almost like a wafer. And it also reminds me a little bit of fish bones. This painting I had so much fun with. I adored trying to figure out how to get that orange to appear wet, but not like a pattern, as part of the local color and value of that dress. Like what happens when it gets wet, it gets dark, and then the shadows have to get dark in the same way that the shadows have to stay in the light part. All that formal stuff that you learn in school. And it was really fun to paint. It was complicated, but I felt that there was just this, where it was positioned, and I got really into painting those rocks in the water and all that other stuff. So you'll see, I paint landscape also, so it's all in my mind pretty connected. This is a painting that I did, and one of the things I want to say about this painting is that a lot of times people don't always know what the image is right away, especially in this painting. I posted it on Facebook once, and I got a comment that said, "Hey, nice painting, is that a trash bag?" And I thought, well, no, it's not a trash bag. But other people have said, is it a crime scene? Did someone die? I get all those kinds of, I don't know. I get people commenting in ways that I would not have thought of myself. This one is kind of fairy tale-like. I almost didn't like it for that, but now I kind of like it for that reason. Because although it seems sort of fairy tale-ish, the kind of intensity that I was in while I was painting those lily pads was pretty serious, So it was like, I don't know, it just didn't feel like, I felt like it was more than not that fairy tale, never mind. I'm going to just keep going because I'm not making any sense. Here's another one, and that's the same velvet dress. So I use the dresses over and over again. And again, we have lily pads, and that brings us to this dress, which was the beginning, and I don't know if I told you, but it was going to come up again, and this was where, it was just part of this series, which was a pivotal series for me. This painting, interestingly, I have noticed as I look at it more that it looks like a jellyfish or some kind of fish up there in the corner with the pleats up here, kind of like scales, and it looks like, my husband has a saltwater aquarium, so I'm always looking at corals and rocks and things like that, and so it just looks like seaweed and some kind of jellyfish or blobby fish with scales. I think it's because the color of that wet gray fabric really reminds me of the kind of silvery feel of the fish. Then I did, on our 10th anniversary, we went to Aruba. So if we're going to go to Aruba, what are we going to do? We're going to bring dresses, and we're going to stage dresses the whole time that we're there, which is what we did, which is what artists usually do on vacation. They hardly ever don't stop thinking about work or working in some capacity. Aruba had these mangrove trees, which were beautiful, really, really beautiful. And really, there again is that sharp versus delicate thing. And what happened with the mangrove trees was that the seaweed dried on it and turned it white, so it almost looks like it's done in Antarctica, or that it's a really snowy day, which I really liked. This is kind of a tortured looking thing, and I can see how people would think that was a little bit sad. But it's one of my favorite paintings, maybe because of that. I think that kind of red that when it goes into the water turns more magenta and all that kind of thing. And then our friend the blue dress comes back. Here it is again, and Aruba has traveled many, many, many places. I want to talk to you a little bit, oh wait a minute. Okay, so this is also one that was done in Aruba. I want to talk to you a little bit about, people often ask me, what's the meaning of the dress in water? And I don't really have a great answer. I can give you a couple of ideas that it might be. One is autobiographical. I think that my work has always been somewhat autobiographical, so whatever I'm going through and feeling kind of comes out in my work. The other is more universal. Like, I think that it kind of represents sometimes, to some people, fragility, loss. For me, it was also renewal and surrender. One of the things that I think in this work, it has a bit of the darkness of the women in the hotel, but also some lightness of some of the stuff that I was doing with the pure white dresses. I think that that's kind of the way that I see the world and me in the world, is that there's always going to be the coexistence of dark and light, and a way of kind of understanding it and grappling with it and accepting it. And by accepting it, surrendering to it. And it's difficult to do that sometimes, because sometimes the work appears more sad than I intended to appear, because I see beauty in sadness all the time. But so that gives you a little bit. Oh, and then the other is clearly theatrical, which means purposely directed, staged and lit, related to a larger story, and open to the imagination of the viewer. So those are just some of my thoughts about when people say, what does your work mean? Those are some things. So I want to show you landscape now. I had been doing landscape paintings for a long, long time. Undergrad, grad, mostly like in the summer, and I did tons and tons of plein air landscapes, and I also taught landscape painting outdoors. But after I painted plein air for a while, once again, I was not really that interested in what I was looking at. I wasn't really interested in the colors that I was seeing. I could mix them up, I could put them down, but in order for me to really be engaged, I had to find some kind of story in the landscape that was interesting enough for me to paint. So I got interested in the forest, and finding magic in the forest, and finding that sense of darkness and lightness, and mystery, spirituality, anything that would bring me into another kind of a transcendent feeling, which is always it's not even really what I aim for when I'm painting, but what ends up happening. And I think that's actually a better way of going about it. If you say I want to paint something transcendent, I have no ideas if these are transcendent. That's probably not the word that I mean, but what I mean is that when I'm painting, it happens because it's something that I've always been interested in. Like, all those themes that have been going through my life and work kind of come out no matter what subject it is that I'm painting, I think. I mean, I don't know. And then I was very interested. One of the reasons why I also used other references was because the light that I was interested in capturing was very fleeting. It wasn't something that I could stay and sit in front of. I just couldn't do that. So, and also, I just have to say one thing. One of the reasons that I feel like I was I was okay and working from other references was that I spent years in front of these landscapes and years in many, many figure classes and I teach observational drawing, I teach observational painting, so I stay in it so that I don't like kind of lose what's actually happening in terms of space and light and foreground, middle ground, background, all that formal stuff. And I was working with the water again, reeds, kind of like what was happening in the dresses. And then I did some more forests. So you can see here that I was taking a lot of liberties with color. Loving post-impressionists, loving Matisse, loving the Fauvists, all those people. And also loving Baroque painting, chiaroscuro, light and dark. But wanting to have a feeling of moving through things, like a path that you can move through. This painting, clearly beautiful autumn day, but I think it still has that sense of kind of a brooding sadness that I had when I was doing my model paintings, even though I didn't intend that to happen. This painting I remember doing fairly quickly, and that red triangle up at the top, there was a lot more complexity there, but I really liked that just blob of that particular magenta kind of color, kind of balancing out all the other greens, and I just left it, which I would do often. I would just leave things if it was just a sense of, I feel like painting oftentimes is editing, and discerning and leaving things out. It's not like John Moore, my former professor, would want to leave everything in, but for me it was like leaving as little in as possible, or as much, to kind of organize all that stuff. So here's some more. These are actually pretty recent summer woods paintings. And then I want to talk to you a little bit about what happened during the pandemic. I started painting scenes in and around where I live. I live in Salem, Massachusetts, which I don't know if any of you have ever been there, but it's a beautiful, beautiful city, and it has really beautiful architecture. This is Chestnut Street, which is it's just in the historical district of downtown Salem. And my husband, Norm again, has an eye disease. He's actually legally blind, and he has something called retinitis pigmentosus, and what it has done is that it's progressive. His has luckily stayed pretty stable over the years, but he has no periphery vision. So at the beginning of the pandemic, mask wars were happening, and we were in Salem, and there's tons of tourists in Salem. So Salem had a mask mandate, but the tourists coming in didn't pay attention to that. And I was pretty scared about COVID and masks and everything. And it was before we knew that outside was really pretty safe. So my husband, was saying like, I'm going out for a walk. And I'd say, no, it's the middle of the day. There are going to be people passing you and you're going to catch COVID because they're not going to have a mask on. So we used to get into these arguments about it. So finally we made a truce, and I said, let's get up at dawn every day and just walk. Just do an hour walk every day and kind of get that out of our system so that, and then we can go later on, but we'll do it together or whatever. So he agreed. And so this group of paintings was done by taking photo references of Salem at dawn. Lots of liberties taken in the paintings, but it was my way of sort of being connected to where I was. We live right near the water. There's a harbor there. And once again, this is dawn, but it might as well be midnight in some ways in terms of the way I was painting it. This is the last slide that I'm showing you, and one of the reasons why I put this together was not only to kind of have a little bit of a synthesis of what's been going on in my work, but also for myself to see that both the landscape and the dress paintings have a lot of similarities in terms of mood, narrative, all that stuff. There's just, visually, I see myself in all of them. I'm currently doing landscapes. Another thing is that my gallery that represents me And a number of galleries that I've been to in Boston have said, we love these dress paintings, but we're not going to be able to sell them. They look like someone died. And that's been really discouraging. I've had shows of the dress paintings, and I've sold them, but mostly to artists. But Boston is very, very conservative, and they just said, we don't want to show them. They've shown a couple, and so practically speaking, I had to do a show of landscapes, so that's what happened. But I'm really looking forward to getting back into the dress again, because that feels like part of who I am. And there's something about this dress, too, that's aging that I want to kind of get into and talk about and think about. And but I still do love landscape. So who knows what's going to happen. I haven't been traveling for the past couple of years, and traveling always inspires me to find new locations and find new dresses and bring new dresses. One of my students came to see me the other night, and she brought me a dress, and it was this great kind of in-between brown and taupe and gray satin, so it's like a great color to light and throw in water. So we'll see if that comes to be a painting. But let's see, I think that's really all that I need to say. And thank you once again for inviting me. I really enjoyed doing this and just putting this together and kind of seeing what my story was myself. And I'm sure I'll see a few of you this afternoon for studio visits, which I really look forward to. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have them or anything else. So thank you very much. Yeah.
I was just wondering, like, how long these paintings take you?
How long they take me? Okay, which series? Like the dress and painting series?
Yeah, like the dresses.
Dress and water series? I would say anywhere from 8 to 100 hours. Like smaller ones, depends on the scale. Like, you know, that last one that I did that took over 100 hours. And then average like 40 to 50 hours, 60 hours, I don't know. But then some of the little ones were 8 hours, you know. So that's about, and they vary from 10 by 10 to 30 by 40 or 30 by 6 by 48 or something like that. So that's about the scale too. Yeah. Anyone else? Yeah.
Do you say in, well, I guess you do, but the same color scheme for most of these, or do you have like a specific palette?
Oh no, the only time I did those pre-mixed palettes was when I was doing those monochrome things and that kind of dreadful Barbie doll series. But other than that, I paint, I mix and stop and mix. I've managed to learn how to make it fluid while doing that. I don't have a set palette, no.
I know you mentioned the Fauvists and Soutine. Do you have any other influences? Any like other specific artists you
Any other specific artists I'm looking at? I have like, do you mean contemporary or older?
Either.
Yeah, I have tons of artists that I look at. I'm trying to think. Sorry. Vouillard and Bonnard were huge, huge influences on me. You know who? George Bellows. I just saw one of his coming up there. I adore George Bellows. I could stare at his painting forever. And I think one of the reasons is that it has that sense of atmosphere and clarity at the same time, which I just find really fascinating. I should get my phone because I saved some contemporary people. Where is my phone? Oh, it's probably up here. A couple of people. A lot of the people that I'm influenced by aren't always people that paint at all like I do. And the other thing is that I'm going to look at... Okay. One of the artists that I look at a lot is Rebecca Orchid, who is a former student of mine, and I just adore her work. And she goes under Beeorcutt. Let's see, there's another painter that I found, Seth Becker, Sethbecker. I'm trying to think of who else I'm looking at. I just recently found things. A lot of the people that are also in my gallery, Gideon Bach, I don't know if any of you know who that is, Gideonbok. He's someone that I look at. This is a great painter, Polina Barskaya. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but it's Polinabarskaya. Oftentimes I find people that you wouldn't necessarily know because they don't have 20,000 Instagram followers. And most of the people that do, I'm not quite as interested in. And then usually because the 20,000 Instagram followers have spent so much time marketing that I don't know. I think this shut off. Is that still working? Yeah. I don't mean to say that that's a bad thing, but I just mean to say that I kind of just don't spend that much time on Instagram. All right, here's a guy, Randall David Tipton. I really like his paintings. I kind of just look around and see whose paintings I like. I don't know if that's just the way I do it. There's a million more as far as the usuals. Vermeer, huge hero for me. Rembrandt, of course. Caravaggio, big time. Goya, love Goya. Velasquez. Vuillard, I said Vuillard. Degas, a lot of those people are kind of in my world of people that I go back to. Corot. I started looking at people like the Hudson River painters and doing landscapes. I look at them a lot. Thomas Cole, is that his name? But there's like sort of this element of romanticism that I like that I try to get in some of my landscapes. So I think is that enough? That's okay. Any other questions?
Are these on panel or support or canvas, flexible supports?
Panel.
Okay.
Panel for me is so much. I love the way the paint moves on it. Canvas, it just sinks right through.
How do you prepare them?
I just buy gessoed ampersand panels, yeah. And I work in acrylic mostly. Some of them are oil, some of them are acrylic. The later ones are all acrylic. And the reason that happened was when I moved from Gloucester to Salem, I couldn't find my paints for a really long time, and I just found my acrylics. And that was when I was doing like the boat paintings and stuff like that, so I was really frustrated because I couldn't get them to be as fluid, and then I started to figure out how to work them. And since then, since I work at home, I just decided, you know what, I don't really want to have oil in my studio again. I went back and forth. I worked in oil mostly through grad school, and I just kind of switched. But there's good things about both. I just did like this commission portrait thing, and I wished that I was working in oil because the blending wasn't quite as good. But there are other things that are great because glazing is really easy to do with acrylic, but I don't know, but always on panel. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, Helen.
It's not really a question, but I remember when you taught me, you said something very profound that was like, if you don't feel like you have to paint, then just don't even paint. And I found that to be very interesting. So I don't know if you want to speak on that.
Yeah. I think that when students are trying to decide whether they should go to graduate school or whether they should stay in painting at all, the question I always have is, can you not paint? Can you live a life without painting? Without it being pretty much one of the most important things in your life besides, say, family or whatever, even sometimes more than family. Well, can you? And if they say, yeah, I probably could, then they should never. There's no way in the world you're going to actually make it with all the sacrifices to be an artist if it's not something that is in you and has to be in you and has to be explored and has to be there. And it doesn't matter how much talent you have. Some of the most talented people I know have answered the question, no, I can't see myself sitting in a studio day after day. I'm not going to do it. I want to get married. I want to have kids. I want to have a reasonable life that with security and blah, blah, blah. And that's a smart decision. It's not a bad decision. And I don't think it's anything about you're lazy or you're this. Some people just can handle more risk than others. And some people are more driven to that, just have more passion for it. And they need to know like what that is. Otherwise, I imagine if you're in graduate school, you're one of the people that has to make art, whether it's painting or sculpture or whatever it is that you do. There's not really a choice. You find other ways to make money, and sometimes you can make money from art. You know, that's a whole other issue. Yeah. Anything else? You don't have to ask anything else. Okay. My pleasure. Thank you and have a wonderful day.